how common people can make the best use of legal remedies available to them. We are also looking at the institutional structure which are close at hand, which are simple and affordable. But as a student of Dharma Shastra, I would add that accessibility implies something more. Accessibility of law also implies that law should be in tune with people's cultural ethos and their values of life. Law and laws must reflect the will of the people and fulfill their needs and aspirations so as to make them own it. उन्हें लगना चाहिए मेरी चीज है. अगर लगे कानून मेरी चीज नहीं है, then I'm not willing to own it. And when I don't own it, then I don't obey it willingly. So what I think is that laws must reflect the will of the people and fulfill the needs of their needs and aspirations so as to make them to own it and willingly abide by it. Oh, sorry. This is- When people don't appreciate or don't like the law, it becomes difficult to enforce it. And then it becomes very difficult for law enforcing agencies to force people to enforce it. Either they have to use strong arm measures to impose that law on an unwilling people, or they have to let the law hibernate. Ushaga Act 1922 or 1820, what is it, 1923?
2020
And 19,
20 or 28 है
100 years हो गए, कोई नहीं मान रहा भाई, because people don't, many people in the country don't like. So those are the issues which a lawmaker has to keep in mind. So I also understand that since the expression people is quite undefined and will not necessarily exclude the ignorant and the selfish, there would be a tussle between various segments of life of people about what the law should be. कुछ कोई कुछ सोचता है, किसी के कुछ अच्छा है, किसी की नजर में कुछ अच्छा है. So there is going to be a tussle between various segments of the society. Interestingly, Dharma Shastra reflects all these trends. It has its highs and lows. Many regressive ideas have crept into Dharma Shastra, but there are glorious struggles to rid law of many of these injustices. My submission is that, like today, law in our Dharma Shastra tradition also is sometimes hijacked by the strong and the powerful. But the good point is that it strikes back to defeat the negative forces. एक अक्सर हमारे को ये बता दिया जाता है, हो अच्छा पुराने जमाने का धर्मशास्त्र का लो, सारी बुरी बातें हैं उसमें तो मनुस्मृति में तो आग ही लगा दो सबसे अच्छा. So we need to be a little more circumspect, a little more fair to our own tradition, and see what are the good things that we can take from it. And if there is something which is actually regressive, which is not good for our times, we can always skip it. So the resilience and the capacity to reform itself is the true essence of Indian tradition. ये जो मैंने 6 साल 10 20 साल 15 साल जो भी समय मैंने धर्मशास्त्र के अध्ययन में लगाया, मेरा निष्कर्ष यही है कि उसकी सबसे अच्छी चीज क्या है? The capacity to reform itself. We have never stuck to a particular idea of law. We have constantly changed, we have constantly evolved. This is because the fundamental purpose of law in our tradition is protection of the weak and the vulnerable. Manu says, if the king does not punish those who deserve to be punished, the strong will roast the weak like you roast fish on the skewers. लोहे की सलाख पे मछली को चला के तंदूर में डाल के जैसे लोग खा जाते हैं, that is the उपमा. That is the kind of expression Manusmriti has used. यदि मैं प्रणयेत राजा दंडम दंडे स्वतंत्रतः शूले मत्स्यान मछली की तरह से अपक्षन पका लें दुर्बलान की तरह जना दुर्बलों को लोग मछली की तरह पका के खा लें. तो I think that is the fundamental principle from which धर्मशास्त्र law begins. देखिए theoretically और व्यवहार में practical में law में बहुत अंतर है. That is true of today and that will remain true. Not only law as such but all kinds of normative systems. माता पिता की आज्ञा का पालन करना चाहिए, हम में से कितने करते हैं? भाई भाई को बहुत प्यार करना चाहिए, हम में से कितने करते हैं? तो व्यवहार में और आदर्श में अंतर रहेगा. तो मेरा कहना यह है कि जब हम धर्मशास्त्र के एनालिसिस कर रहे हैं तो नितिन जी से भी बात हो रही थी, आयुष से भी, प्रमाण क्या है? What these things actually happening on this in life? I don't know. तो उस जमाने के judgments and orders they were written on paper. There were courts, I will talk about it. There were courts. There was a legal procedure. Judgments were handed out in various disputes, but they were all written on paper, at most on pieces of cloth. They not survive. मैं नहीं बता सकता कि ये प्रमाण देखो, ये फलाना रिपोर्ट खोल लो, फलाने सुप्रीम कोर्ट के हाई कोर्ट का उस दिन का ऑर्डर, आई डोंट नो. तो मेरा कहना यह है कि जब हम धर्मशास्त्र को पढ़ रहे हैं तो हम अच्छा व्यवहार में नहीं हो रहा था, कम से कम थ्योरेटिकल मॉडल तो है. Can we look at the theoretical model? Can we analyze the theoretical model? So even if it is a theoretical model, I am happy to read it and see what I can gain from. तो जो दुर्बलों की रक्षा करना अगर हमारे धर्म का मुख्य प्रयोजन बताया गया है, तो this in the Indian knowledge system, this function of protecting the weak and stabilizing the society, that belongs to the institution of dharma. A special branch of knowledge called Dharma Shastra was developed. हमारे बहुत सारे शास्त्र, काव्य शास्त्र है, which deals about theories of poetry. दर्शन है, which is philosophy. व्याकरण है, which deals with language. ऐसे धर्म शास्त्र is a special branch of learning in the various particular in the various syllabi for Sanskrit schools and colleges and universities and gurukuls. Dharma Shastra was and still continues to be an important branch of learning. So we had a special branch of learning devoted to the study of the society. So Dharma Shastra was developed to discuss matters relating to Dharma. Dharma defines the fundamental values of life. Dharma defines the fundamental values of life and creates an institutional framework to realize those values. दोनों चीजें हैं. बेसिक वैल्यूज को भी हमने डिफाइन किया है और उन वैल्यूज को हम कैसे रियलाइज करेंगे व्यवहार में, उसके लिए इंस्टीट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क्स हैव आल्सो बीन क्रिएटेड. एंड धर्म इज अ वेरी वाइड कॉन्सेप्ट. धर्म सीक्स टू गाइड एंड डिफाइन आवर इंटरैक्शन at various levels, interaction between individuals and interaction between various social groups and communities. And it is very large. It covers all parts of life. It covers our social life, political life, economic life, religious life, and legal. So it has all these parts: social, political, economic, religious, and legal. तो हम सोचते धर्म का मतलब केवल भगवान की पूजा करना? No. That's a very small part of dharma. सारी इकोनॉमी को कैसे मैनेज करना है, that is also dharma. पॉलिटी को कैसे मैनेज करना है, इंटरनल डोमेस्टिक सिक्योरिटी सिस्टम क्या है, फॉरेन विदेश नीति क्या होगी, what is the foreign policy, what is the fiscal policy, what is government, what is administration, everything falls within the larger ambit of dharma. And so dharma is a much wider topic. So one very important offshoot of dharma, one very important offshoot of dharma is vyavahara. The word vyavahara signifies that part of dharma which is justiciable in a court of law set up by established political authority, which in the ancient and medieval context meant the king. From the point of view of accessibility of law, our Vyavahara system created several state and non-state fora for resolution of people's disputes, arising out of non-compliance with dharma. The long and continuous tradition of Dharma Shastra exists from about 7th, 8th century BCE to 21st century. प्राचीन बात करी, but are we talking of ancient India or are we talking of medieval India? I'm saying no. When I'm talking of धर्मशास्त्र, I'm talking of India as it is today. Because हमारे जीवन का बहुत सारा पक्ष आज भी उन्हीं बेसिक वैल्यूज से डिटरमिन हो रहा है, हमें नहीं पता. It's like people think, oh, I'm speaking Bengali. Somebody says I'm speaking Gujarati. Somebody says I'm speaking Marathi. But the fact is, they're all speaking variants of Sanskrit. तो आज भी जो हमारी जिंदगी है, चाहे बंगाल में हो, चाहे मद्रास में हो, चाहे कहीं पर भी हो देश में, large part of our life, not only religious life, but our social life in particular, is still determined by what was written 2,500 years ago. ये हम realize नहीं करते इस बात को. So धर्मशास्त्र is not about ancient India. धर्मशास्त्र is not about just medieval India. धर्मशास्त्र is about our life today. कास्ट सिस्टम आज नहीं है, खत्म हो गया आपके देश में से. स्त्रियों की स्थिति परफेक्ट हो गई, अमेरिका की तरह हो गई. तो जो हो रहा है, अच्छा बुरा जो हो रहा है, it's a large part is a continuation of the same thought process. So let us please clearly understand when we talk of Dharmashastra, let us not be fooled by the idea that we are talking to something which happened in the past. We are living in the present. तो सती का केस एक केस हुआ ग्रुप कवर का 30 years ago, but उसने देश की जड़ों को हिलाया था अभी. And 30 years is nothing in the life of a nation. So but in those 3,000 odd years, life has not remained static. It cannot remain static. Nowhere in the world can it remain static. आप किसी बहुत छोटे से गांव में बिल्कुल दुनिया से दूर पहाड़ों के कहीं ऊपर बैठे हैं, then life might not change. But वो जिंदगी हमारे धर्मशास्त्र में नहीं है. We are talking of big states. We are talking of big cities. We are talking of very, very economically, socially rich villages. We are talking of a very complex society. We're not talking of a small tribal society living thousands of kilometers away from civilization. We are talking of the civilization. जो देश की पूरी कल्चर समाज था, उसकी बात हम धर्मशास्त्र में कर रहे हैं. So it had and has a very wide reach and impact. तो उसमें जब मैं कह रहा हूँ we are talking of 3,000 years, so life has not remained static. Even the core values and norms and structures which guide life cannot remain constant, and they have not remained constant in Dharmashastra. Therefore, in the Indian understanding, Dharma has developed techniques to constantly rediscover and reinvent itself according to the growing needs of time. ये सबसे important. Dharma is not static. ऐसा होता था तो मैं क्या करूं, अब तो नहीं होता. और ये मैं आज नहीं कह रहा. It's not that people now in 21st century will say this, or people in the 20th century will claim this. कि जमाना बदल गया. जमाना हर बार बदलता रहा है भाई. हर साल हर 10-15 साल में जमाना बदलता है. तो 3000 से बदलता ही रहा है. ये भी बहुत जरूरी समझने वाली बात. So Dharma has developed techniques to constantly rediscover itself and reinvent itself according to the growing needs of time. When Iqbal says कुछ बात है कहती मिटती नहीं हमारी, he is referring to that Sanatan element of Indian life. Sanatan is something which is forever. The word Sana means सदा. आप सदा तो जानते हैं, सदा हमेशा. तो वेद में सदा के लिए सना शब्द है. तो Sanatan means that which exists forever. But when I say dharma is Sanatan, or that our dharma is Sanatan, I do not mean even for a moment that it is unchangeable or immutable. In our tradition, Sanatan means that which always remains relevant and true by constantly evolving and reinventing itself and making itself relevant to changing times, even while preserving its commitment to dharma. So ये कैसे हुआ? The process of lawmaking in India has a recorded history of about 3,000 years. The Dharma Sutras, you're all students and teachers and researchers of law. Dharma Sutras, which supposedly belong to the period about 800 BCE, अब कब लिखेंगे, आई एम नॉट विलिंग टू मेक अ कमिटमेंट, लेकिन हमें बता दिया गया धर्मशास्त्र की किताबों में, हिस्ट्री ऑफ धर्मशास्त्र भाई 600-800 BCE से होंगे तो होंगे, आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू डिस्प्यूट दैट। मेरे लिए वो भी बहुत है। आज कौन से समय, आज है 2000, हम कब गिरे 2023, तो समथिंग इज रिटन 800 BC, तो 2800 साल 3000 साल हो गए, हम हैप्पी विद। आई डोंट हैव टू फाइट कि हम 10,000 साल पुराने हैं कि 20,000 साल पुराने, 3000 भी कम नहीं होते भाई दुनिया में। तो फिर 300 3000 is a road, it's good enough for me. So Dharmashastra, Sutras, which were written about 800 BC to 600 BC, they already contain fragments of laws. With Arthashastra, again approximately 4th century, 3rd century BCE, we have a more complete text on substantive and procedural laws and laws of evidence. Dharmashastra as such, that a more complete picture emerges largely with the Manusmriti, which is the first available document today, which gives a comprehensive exposition of all aspects of dharma, including vyavahara, that is law. Manu has a complete chapter on substantive laws, procedural laws, laws of evidence. A detailed exposition of the conventional titles of dispute is found there. I'm tempted to digress a little. Some of the provisions of the Manusmriti appear to be very obnoxious and outdated, but that does not take away from the fact that it is a major text on which the entire edifice of Dharma was continuously built and rebuilt over 2,500 years. Those who have not read it fully do not realize how profoundly many of its thoughts continue to impact, influence, shape, and govern our lives even today. The true essence of our tradition can be understood when we see how post-Manu works, commentaries, and digests have treated Manu. They hold him in high esteem, no doubt about it. But they unhesitatingly depart from Manu's prescription. And this is what I'm going to elaborate on in my talk today. The Dharmashastra tradition has made a strenuous effort to keep we, the people of India, at the center of its lawmaking activity. So to come back to the Dharma or Vyavahar textual tradition, after Manusmriti, we have the Smritis of Yagyavalkya, Narad, Shatya, and Brihaspati. They provide many more rules concerning legal procedure. There are a dozen other Smritis which are referred to in subsequent works as authorities. By about 5th century CE, again, that's a guess, and I'm not making any commitment. By about 5th century CE, major Smritis have been composed. So several other works called Smritis by their authors continue to be written. So those Smritiyan mil jaye. In about 5th century CE, a new genre of Dharma works begins to be written. These are Tikas and Bhashyas, or commentaries on earlier Sutras and Smritis. Another genre of works called Nibandhas, mostly translated as digests, also appeared. Digests continued to be written well into the time of the British East India Company, when first Governor General Warren Hastings and then Justice William Jones commissioned Sanskrit scholars to compile codes of law to be applied to the Hindus of Bengal. My reading of Dharmashastra tells me that in the 3,000 years, this is another important point that I want to make, that 3,000 years again, I'm saying, Dharma 3,000 and Vyavahar also 3,000, I'm saying. So my reading of Dharmashastra texts tells me that in the 3,000-year-old history of Dharmashastra, law as a political category, as an instrument of the state, as a state power outside the pale of religion, had come into existence at a very early stage. So there is a clear demarcation between Dharma and Vyavahara. Distinction between Dharma and Vyavahara is marked by Manusmriti itself, when it devotes a separate chapter to government and administration and a separate chapter to law and litigation, and makes king the guarantor of Dharma. Dharma se pratibhu. Pratibhu is a guarantor. So the king is the guarantor of Dharma. Yagyavalkya has devoted 1/3 of his work to law and litigation. Both put dispensation of justice as Raj Dharma, or the duties of the king. And I see and I claim and I'm going to explain that the authority of the king goes beyond the words of sacred texts and beyond the powers of a priest. This is very clearly articulated and argued in the 8th century by Vedatithi, a very important commentator on Manusmriti. I'm going to give his arguments in detail tomorrow. In the post-Smriti period, so dozens of digests on law are written, and each is an attempt at recreating and reinventing Dharma, with a very large number of texts claiming to be and also recognized as authoritative at different times, at different places. The need for revisiting and recodifying Dharma was repeatedly felt. The problem is, being such an old civilization, we have hundreds of texts claiming कि हम बड़े authentic हैं, हम तो दिव्य हैं, वेद कहता है हम तो ईश्वर ने बनाया, सारे स्मृतिकार कहते हैं अच्छा तुम्हें ईश्वर ने बनाया होगा, लेकिन हमने वेद को पढ़ने वाले ऋषियों ने जो ज्ञान दिया वो स्मृतियां हैं. So they are as authentic, as authoritative as Smriti and as Vedas. So Ved प्रामाणिक है, स्मृतियां प्रामाणिक हैं, and there are dozens and hundreds of Smritis as I said. So we are in a soup. We are in a state of extreme confusion क्योंकि सारी स्मृतियों में अलग अलग बातें कही जा रही हैं. They're contradicting one another. कोई कुछ बोल रहा है, कोई कुछ बोल रहा है. But that is not how law can operate. You can't say, okay, you have the choice. Either you stop at the red light or you don't stop it. That is not possible. Law has to be very, very clearly formulated and imposed. There's no question of ifs and buts in law. So we have had this problem. We have faced this problem for several years, for at least 2,500 years, or at least 2,000 years, that we have a huge reservoir of rules. And I'm asked to create a digest, create a ribbon. How do I do it? And many of these digest writers were actually commissioned by local rulers to compile books of law. So a close study of digests can reveal the process of bringing law in tune with people's aspirations at a given point in time. That is where the question of access to law comes in. The problem with all authoritative texts is that while they're designed to serve a particular purpose, they begin to lose their effectiveness and utility with every change in time and location, desh and kal. People's interests and their understanding of right and wrong also changes with time, and hence the reasons for continuation of earlier laws also cease to exist. जो सोचकर पहले कानून बनाया था, those reasons don't exist. They're not valid anymore. Therefore, Dharmashastra invented the honor of Nibandhas to allow time to time revision and reformulation of Dharma. A typical Niban writer is a creator cum compiler. He seeks to present law on various subjects in a more organized and a comprehensive manner. One major dilemma confronting authors of medieval digests is that they are called upon to create laws on the basis of very ancient materials. Neelkanth, whom I will introduce a little later, writing in the 17th century, is still using Manusmriti, still using Yagyavalkya as his source books. So there is a gap of 2,000 years or around that, during which social and political systems have changed. When Manusmriti was written, probably only, as it says, only Kshatriyas officially anointed as kings could be judges. So जिस क्षत्रिय का विधिवत राज्याभिषेक हुआ वही न्याय कर सकता है. But then by 1600 years later, individuals belonging to many other communities and even foreigners have become kings. How is Manusmriti relevant? So the author Neelkanth has to recognize them as kings. The foreigners have to be recognized as kings. People belonging to various other communities, non-Kshatriya communities, have to be recognized as kings. You can't not recognize them. You have to recognize them. You have to validate their statement. So Neelkanth, commenting on the word king in Yagyavalkya Smriti, says, king is not a Kshatriya alone. It could be anyone who has been authorized to protect the subjects. He does not even say that he should be formally coronated with due rituals. Because if somebody is a non-Kshatriya, he will not be coronated with due rituals, because in rituals you have to reciting Vedic mantras, and many communities are debarred from even hearing Vedic rituals. तो छोड़ो तो कहाँ से होगा वैदिक मंत्र पर उच्चारण करके उसका राज्याभिषेक होगा ही नहीं. So the definition changes. Who is the king? Whoever has been authorized to protect the king. Ritual का definition में से वो element ही निकाल दिया. In fact, this is very interesting. Many of you would be knowing that in Maharashtra there was a huge debate about Shivaji's eligibility for Rajyabhishek ceremony. Brahmins of Pune refused to recognize him as a Kshatriya and refused to conduct his Rajyabhishek. So Shivaji had to invite Vishweshwar Bhatta, also called Gaga Bhatta, a Dharma Shastra scholar from Banaras, to anoint him king. अपने लोग जो थे पुणे में राज्य करते थे, पुणे के ब्राह्मणों ने कहते you are not a king, we don't recognize you. So no Rajyabhishek for Shivaji. So Gaga Bhatta comes from Banaras to perform his Rajyabhishek. So another point to be noted is that most digests contain similar rules, almost similar rules. This may sound repetitive and meaningless at times. However, I want to argue that each digest is marked by originality and creativity. A digest writer's creativity lies in his understanding of the needs of law in his times. He must know all the ingredients required to create law on a particular subject. So even as he goes about collecting his rules from various sources, he already has in his mind an overall structure. And he chooses his rules which fit into his overall scheme of law. So the digest writer is not simply collecting all kinds of rules randomly from various places, but he has a certain image of what the law ought to be, and he is collecting his rules accordingly. So I will now quickly jump to Vyavahar Vayuh of Nilkant Bhatta, who was in the court in the present Etawah district of Uttar Pradesh in the first half of the 17th century. So we know his time, we know his exact location. So 17th century, first half of the 17th century, Etawah district in Uttar Pradesh. This is a part, his Vyavahar Vayuh is a part of a 12-volume work on Dharma Shastra, dealing with different aspects of Dharma. This one, Vyavahar Vayuh, deals with law and litigation under the overall supervision of the state and the king. Now, Nilkant has given some very interesting comments in the opening verses. He says, my work cannot be alleged to be incomplete, for I have left out what is honored by my critics. His critics prefer some other rules. So even as he's compiling a book of law, even he's compiling a digest in his time probably to be used in that region, there are many scholars who are contesting, who claim that his collection is not perfect, and that there are other rules which he has left out. So he's making a choice. So what does he say? My text cannot be alleged to be incomplete, for what I have left out is honored by my critics, because what they say is without authority. Here, what is important is this last bit. What my critics are saying, the rules that my critics are citing are without authority. वो भी वही मनुस्मृति से ला रहे वो भी आज्ञवल से लाएंगे, वो भी नारद से लाएंगे, वो भी गाते हैं बृहस्पति से लाएंगे. But what Nilkant says, no, those rules are without authority. He says my digest is not impacted by this omission. Like a garden is not impacted by the absence of sky flowers. आपने सुंदर एक गार्डन बनाया, माला बनाई, तरह तरह के फूल लगाए, लेकिन आसमान में खिलने वाले फूल नहीं लगाए, तो क्या उससे माला बनी नहीं? क्या कुछ कमी रह गई माला में? तो आसमान में फूल नहीं होते तो आसमान के फूल कहाँ से लगाऊंगा माला? ये इस लेवल पे जाके वो अपने प्रतिद्वंदियों का तिरस्कार कर रहा है कि तुम्हारे रूल्स तो आसमानी फूल हैं, They don't exist. So this is an absolute denial of authority to rules which is opponents preferred. This is also an indication that the vigorous discussions and debates took place on various legal issues, and Neelkant included what he found to be more correct and acceptable. So when we look at Dharmashastra text, we often find a lot of material which may not pass the test of rationality today. Neelkant starts his work with laws of evidence and procedure, that's fine. In that section, we find a long description of discussion on proofs or evidence. And then there is a long discussion on what we call divine evidence of Divya Pramana. Several kinds of Divya Pramanas are prescribed, वो पहले से पुराने ज़माने से चले आ रहे हैं. But what Neelkant has done is he's added a long section on the rituals to be performed. And Neelkant has elaborated more on the ritual part than on the evidence part. He mentions the number of priests to be employed, the mantras to be recited, the gods to be invoked, the offerings to be made into the fire. While for all other matters, even within Divya, the author relies largely on known authority, but to construct this entire ritual part, he seems to have relied on some other sources which he has not disclosed. Now, I don't intend to burden you with the details of the ritual, but I want to draw your attention to this idea of how the common people's beliefs in the mysterious and the divine have entered their heart. So when you talk of excess, this is the point that I want to make. If you say common people have excess, then common people also have all kinds of ideas. Fear may sound to us, but that's what they believe. That is their faith. So their faith also enters the legal system. That is what I want to find out. I will show tomorrow that we have tried to fight this very energetically and have forcefully argued for giving Vyavahar a rational foundation, free from all these elements of mysterious and the divine, but that in many texts these elements are available, goes to show that the common people's beliefs have impacted these digests. This is from the section on the Tula Vidya, the weighing scale test. Initially, there is a description of how to build the weighing scale, then begin the ritual part. The person who offers to take the weighing scale test has to observe fast for 1 or 3 days. He must take bath early in the morning. He then has to appoint 4 priests, offer them clothes and dakshina. They must recite valedictory verses. Drums and musical instruments must be played by the Pran Vivak, the judge, the person who questions and recites shlokas inviting dharma, all the lokpalas, all the adityas, all the marutas to witness the test. So even when we have a wedding ceremony in India, a Hindu wedding, you invite all the gods to be witnesses. So he is inviting all the gods to be witness to the Divya, to the Tuladi. So how local religious sentiments go into the making of law is also reflected in a minor change introduced by Neelkant in the law regarding the liability of cattle owners if their cattle destroy somebody's crop. आजकल ये भी चल रहा है, यूपी में बहुत चल रहा है, कुत्ता पशु की प्रॉब्लम, people have abandoned their bulls, etc. They are creating trouble. So this has been an ongoing process. So what if cattle destroy somebody's crop? Earlier authorities prescribed a certain fine on the cattle owners. In the opinion of Kushanas, cited by a large number of digests, if a cow destroys anything, any crop during some celebration or during the period of Shraddha, no liability comes on the owner of the cow. So if other cattle, other animals destroy crops, there is some fine. But if it is done by a cow, holy cow, then there is no fine. Neelkant goes a step further to protect destruction of crops by cows as an act of great dharma. He says, whatever is consumed by cows yields a bigger benefit to the owner than performance of a Vajpayee sacrifice. He almost threatens the poor victim by saying that if you seek any compensation for crops destroyed by cows, then neither gods nor ancestors will accept any offering that you make. This looks like a prohibition, actually. This looks like a prohibition against seeking compensation. But this is not a legal provision. This is where we need to apply our mind. When he says, God will not accept your offerings, or your ancestors will not accept Shraddha, it is not a legal bar. So I will say this is not a rule of Vyavahar, but of Dharma. Because no this worldly penalty or fine of punishment by any court of law is prescribed for seeking compensation. If I say if my crops have been destroyed by cow, but I want compensation, I am not debarred from approaching a court. The statement only holds out the threat of failure of rituals. Hence, it does not have the force of law and it cannot become a bar to seeking compensation. So when we look at Dharma Shastras, we also have to be very careful about what is the exact import of any rule. Does it fall within the domain of Dharma or does it fall within the domain of Vyavahar? In creating new sets of laws for various regions, how much time do I have? 45 minutes more. तो मैंने study में देखा मैं तो because in creating new sets of laws for various regions, local traditions get reflected in texts belonging to different regions. For example, Neelakantha has not recognized the 12 kinds of suns listed in all the Smritis and in most of the digests. He categorically states that only 2 kinds of suns are recognized. The Auras, that is the self-born sons, and Dattak, that is the adopted sons. All other 10 kinds enumerated in Dharma Shastra texts are not valid in Kali Yuga. Attu Dattak Vinna Gauna Putra Kalau Varja. Kalau Kali Varja, they are prohibited. While constructing a digest, an author is also aware of the needs of his times. While reading a text, one can see what are the issues he has highlighted. What are the issues that he has focused on? For instance, Neelakantha again has offered detailed comments and debates on the issue of adoption, which I have not seen in many other digests. So there is something very peculiar happening in this point of time, in this particular region, or wherever his book is in force, whatever is acceptable. So on the rest of the titles of dispute, his comments are very scanty and almost missing. In those sections, he merely collects rules from various sources and presents them in an organized fashion. But it is only in the context of Dattak, in the context of adoption, that he has given the longest discussion and raised the maximum number of issues. In this section on Dattak, there are again some non-legal, apparently non-legal material. Again, we need to see, is it actually non-legal or it has some legal implication? One may wonder at the inclusion of some apparently non-legal material in this work. For instance, in the section on partition, he has introduced a lengthy discussion on how the undivided, divided, and reunited members of family may perform various religious rituals for gods and ancestors. I mean, vibhajan nahi hua, no partition, they're together. Then there is a partition, and then after partition, some reunites. So there are 3 stages: undivided brothers or undivided family, then a divided family, and then the reunited members. And there is a comment, there is a discussion on how they should perform various religious rituals for gods and ancestors. So those who are familiar with the joint family system know that so long, even today, that's why I'm saying many of the traditions continue. So long as a family remains joint, it keeps a common kitchen and a common puja. But they worship together, eat together, common place of worship. On all special occasions, members of the family will get together to worship at the same place, before the same god. There's a Kul Devi, Kul Devata. So it belongs. Normally, all brothers also perform rituals for their dead parents and ancestors together. Therefore, making a separate kitchen and having a separate place of worship is seen as a sign of breakup. In my understanding, therefore, these rituals, these rules about performance of ritual, etc., have a certain legal implication. If the fact of partition is disputed in any case, these facts can come handy as evidence. This is once again a proof of how people's beliefs and practices have impacted laws as such in the Dharmashastra tradition. The act of law also requires constant monitoring and correction. Sometimes rules made to protect the interest of one segment of the population have rather very unhappy consequences for others. किसी का भला करने के लिए कानून बना, किसी का नुकसान हो गया. So the कानून और धर्म व्यवहार has to kind of readjust. The balance of justice or injustice keeps shifting. Therefore, a lawmaker has to be on constant vigil, and he must take steps to ameliorate the suffering of the people. This is the logic followed by Neelkant in the section on impartible estate. Wealth acquired by an individual with his own knowledge and skill is impartible. If I earn something because of my some skills and knowledge, then that whatever money I acquire, if I make a house, etc., I will not divide it. At the time of partition, my brothers will not get a share in it. Sounds reasonable. But this is the logic for Isaac. So impartible. Neelkant first cites Tartan, who says that a brother who acquires any wealth with his knowledge or skills does not have to share it with an uneducated brother. But Neelkant is not convinced. He says he draws a limit around this rule. He says that this rule will be applicable only if the uneducated brother has his own source of income. If he does not have any source of income, then the educated brother is under an obligation to share his self-acquired wealth with the brother. So this is in tune with the idea of the joint family and the role of the eldest brother in the traditional joint family. The joint family system was designed by the society to particularly to take care of those who could not fend for themselves. Otherwise, if everybody is independent, everybody is earning, everybody is well off, then you don't need a joint family. Joint family came handy only to take care of the people who are not able to fend for themselves. So if there is a brother who is not, for various reasons, unable to take care of himself, then Neelkant will expect the elder brother to even share his self-acquired wealth with their brother. And that is how widows, orphans, the sick, and the aged were kept under the care of the family. This is also how law comes close to people in distress, comes to the rescue of people in distress. Sometimes local political conditions and social conditions also determine the course of lawmaking. Narada's list of persons not entitled to a share at partition has an entry called Apayatrita. Apayatrita. An earlier digest writer interpreted it to mean a person presumed to be dead or declared to be dead by the family because of his acts of sedition and treason. So if there's somebody who goes against the interests of the king, that is sedition, and king punishes him or decides to punish him, the family will also presume him to be dead. And if he is dead, he loses a share in the family property. But Neelkant again is not convinced. He says he rejects this interpretation by claiming that the idea of notional death and subsequent disentitlement from inheritance is not prescribed in any Dharmashastra. Avidhana, there is no such vidhan anywhere. And Neelkant then seems to be arguing that the family cannot be forced to disown a political revolution. A person draws the right to inherit because of his peculiar relationship with the deceased. So the state cannot alter any such family arrangements. Neelkant interprets this word to mean a Dvija who has undertaken a prohibited journey across the sea. So sea travel here is shown to be a taboo in that particular region, particularly in that particular region. So this reconstruction of laws on the basis of available Smriti materials has also given the opportunity to later digest writers to tone down the rigors of law if they found it to be very cruel and harsh. Again, bringing it close to people. So this is also a part of accessibility, I would say. For instance, Yamasmriti laid down that a Brahmin woman who, out of infatuation, had a physical relationship with a Shudra should be killed by letting loose wild dogs on her. Kam Shwabhi Khare, let her be killed by dogs. Neelkant again does not agree. He does not directly reject Yam, but relies on a clarification offered by the Smriti Chandrika of Devar Bhatkar, another digest writer, that this extreme punishment should be awarded only in very extreme cases. So don't treat this as a normal course, as a normal punishment, because then everybody will start accusing somebody and getting rid of that person. So thus the offense will have to be much more grave to invite this grave retribution, which would mean that each case will be considered on its own facts and circumstances, and then different judges in different courts might come out with different judgments. Personal and local prejudices also influence authors. For example, in Neelkant again, we have the discussion on the caste of the child to be adopted. Manu's shlok cited by Neelkant has the word Sadrisham to describe the child to be adopted. Sadrisham. Pre-Neelkant commentators got stuck with caste issues. Vedhaditi, 8th century, while commenting on Manu's Smriti, says that Sadrisham means similar. So, what do you mean by similar? What is the criteria for similarity? According to Medhatiti, the child should be similar in caste. Should be similar in terms of family or qualities, and he specifically says that it is, Medhatiti says that it is not necessary for the child to belong to the same caste. Therefore, a Brahman can adopt a Kshatriya child or even others. So he does not place any restriction on the caste of the child. This was 8th century Vedantiti. But in 11th century CE, another commentator of Manusmriti, Kullu Bhatta, he says the child should belong to the caste of the adoptive father. Neelkant agrees with Kullu. And to support his claim, he refers to another statement of Yagnaval Smriti, where the author, while summing up his discussion on the types of sons, he says that all these rules apply only to sons belonging to the same caste. So, if the son is to belong to the same caste, then even the adoptive son has to belong to the same caste. But a stray comment by P.V. Kane in P.V. Kane's edition of Vyavahar makes me think again. There he explains Sadrisham, very interesting. Sadrisham is Chaya Vaham, which means one who bears resemblance in terms of facial and other caste को eliminate किया. So the same Neelkant, I am unable to kind of reconcile these two very contradictory statements in Neelkant. I may have to go back and look at it again. But these are two very contradictory things that the same person is saying. Sadrisham, Sadrish in terms of similar in terms of caste, when Sadrisham is Chaya Vaham, one who bears the facial resemblance. Accessibility to law would also probably mean creating conducive conditions in which people feel encouraged to seek the help of law. I can refer to some provisions which are largely accepted by all digest writers. In the context of issuing summons to the defendant, it is laid down that a farmer whose crop is ready to be harvested and a woman who's pregnant cannot be forced to appear before the court immediately. The farmer has to be given sufficient time to harvest his standing crop, and the woman has to be given sufficient time for safe delivery. So this is how Dharma Shastra is trying to make law as close to the needs and requirements of the people as possible. I will now briefly touch upon the issue of institution accessibility, about the institutions designed to administer justice. The idea of making people at the center of lawmaking and law enforcement activity sounds very pragmatic. But anyway, I'll skip this paragraph. In this Dharma Shastra, the basic units of social organization are the Kula, that is family, caste, that is Jati, and Gram, that is village. So Kula, Jati, and Gram, these are the three basic constituents of the society. It is here that most social interaction happens. The village was also the smallest economic unit. Dharmashastra does talk of big traders with huge caravans and even traders who carried merchandise across the seas. But the description of the market that we find in provisions of law regarding sale, purchase, etc., we normally find this pertains largely to a local market. Several small service providers like local washermen, carpenters, weavers, tailors. That is the kind of level of economic activity that they're talking about. So it's a small unit there they have in mind that they're talking about. Village is also the smallest political unit, with the village head being the king's pointsman at the grassroots. He is the first link in the long chain of officials appointed by the king at various levels. So families, caste groups, and villages had their own local traditions and customs to determine their social and economic conduct. Our text mentions some non-state organizations which had their own traditions and conventions that determine the conduct of their members. Shreni, that is an association of traders, which ultimately degenerated into castes. Vigyaneshwar, the commentator on Yagyavalkya Smriti, also mentions Puga and Vrata as social organizations which had their own conventions. Yagyavalkya has mentioned four kinds of courts. First, the ones appointed by the king. Second, tribunals of residents of a village who follow different professions. So even within the village, there are people belonging to different castes and different professional groups. So each of them could have their own dispute settlement machinery. Third, Shreni courts, that is the tribunals of people belonging to the same trade organized, the trade. And last term, the family courts where members of the family themselves got together to resolve disputes. Yagyaval says that these courts function in a certain hierarchy. The family courts are at the lowest level. Then you go to the village court, and then ultimately you go to the king's courts. Neelkanta has also quoted Brihaspati to say that the forest dwellers' courts must be set up in forests. And for soldiers in the army, special tribunals must be fixed or set up in wherever they are in their locations. And for traders, for moving caravans, there should be moving trade, mobile courts or something. Neelkant has also cited a shlok from Vyas to say that nobody else can settle disputes among traders, artisans, tailors, and artists. So the involvement of the so-called outsider is sought to be precluded and excluded. जो है लोग उन्हें पता है हमारी क्या प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, उन्हें पता है हमारे क्या कन्वेंशंस हैं, उन्हें पता है हमारा लाइफस्टाइल क्या है. Let them decide. Instead of some superpower coming in, jumping into say, man, I will settle your disputes and making a mess with their lives. So this idea is very much available. But there are also formal courts set up by kings. They're advised to settle disputes in accordance with people's local traditions. Kul dharma, jati dharma, ग्राम धर्म, श्रेणी धर्म, इन सबको देखकर राजा को लोगों के डिस्प्यूट सेटल करने चाहिए. So if there is a certain particular convention in a family and there is a dispute within that family, you have to give value to, you have to recognize their convention, their tradition, and settle their disputes according to that particular family tradition. Victorious kings are warned against imposing their own legal system on the vanquished communities. But yes, there is a certain hierarchy. If you go towards Kautilya Arthashastra has given a hierarchy of formal courts to be set up by the king at different levels. For every 10 villages, there is an administrative unit called Sangrahan. Then there is the Dronamukh for every 400 villages. And there is the Sthaniya for 800 villages. A court consisting of 3 judges to be set up at each of these units. The lowest court for 10 villages is the first court of justice in the system. And these courts would be most accessible to the people. So this is a state-sponsored kind of a state-created legal system, which is available at the lowest level. But the impression should not go around that non-formal fora given in the Smritis were powerful and autonomous. In fact, the more I read the Dharmashastra Digest, the more I see strong attempts by the state to bring these units under its supervision and control. तो एक दोनों views हैं. एक तरफ there is giving more autonomy to the people, and दूसरी तरफ there is an attempt by the state to kind of control these bodies, control these social sort of organizations, and impose their own laws and systems and procedures. Both the phenomena you can see in the Shastra. So there is a strong attempt by the state to bring these units under its supervision and control. Tartan says that only those conventions of families, etc., particularly of trainees, particularly of traders, only those conventions which have been formally recorded by the king and stamped are enforceable through a court of law. And there are inscriptions, I would be able to cite offhand. I've seen inscriptions where it is recorded that king's officials came to, went down to various remote places to certify and validate the local rules and rules of the local organization. Then there are other kinds of interesting interventions by the state. Dharma Shastra normally recognizes the exclusive jurisdiction of the Brahmanas over religious matters. They are allowed to prescribe and execute various kinds of prayachittas for various kinds of sins. But Devanbhanda, the author of Smriti Chandrika, very clearly says that only a court presided by the king or the Pradvibhag is competent to order a prayachit. The state is trying to jump into religion. Priests will not do it. King will do it. To me, this seems logical because many of the prayachit rituals could lead to serious injury and even death. Second change introduced by medieval Day-6 was to reduce and almost do away with the dangerous and risky elements in some of these Divya Pramanas. For instance, if you've heard of the fire ordeal of Sita, she was made to sit in fire. Who can survive? तो कविता है और देवी है तो बचियां आ गई, हमें बिठा दो, हम तो नहीं बचेंगे. So therefore, they have almost done away with these standards. This medieval. This is a major change, major intervention by the Shastra or by the state whatever agency to remove the dangerous and the risky elements in Divya Pramanas. So in the later period, this fire ritual, Agni Pariksha, Abka kya shuru ho gaya, that a small burning piece of iron will be placed on the hand of the accused. But see nothing. On 7 leaves, the 7 thick patte liye jayenge, us pe rakha jayega, and he will walk 7 steps and then throw it. If he throws it before the 7 steps, then he is guilty. But कम से कम आग में तो नहीं बिठाया. The worst क्या होगा, हाथ जल जाएगा, मैं पूरा तो बच जाऊंगा. So this is an interesting intervention. And then there is also this view to entirely do away with audience. Nahi karna. Rely on human evidence, rely on witnesses, rely on documents. So documents become very important. So by the time you come to later texts, you have various kinds of documents listed in Dharma Shastra texts. So disputes necessarily imply differences and clash of interest. Parties with clashing interests approach the interlocutors for resolving their disputes. Often the dispute revolves around words of a Dharma Shastra text. Opposite parties seek to interpret the same line in different ways. They try and extract opposing implications from the same text. It is the responsibility of the king or the presiding officer of the court to see which interpretation serves the interest of justice best. This is going to form the core of my discussion tomorrow. With this, I come to end of my presentation today. I want to thank the university and faculty for inviting me And to Chandraji, Mrityunjay, and Ayush for extending all the wonderful hospitality and taking care of me. Very good.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful presentation on the idea of law and justice in ancient medieval India. Now, I would like to invite questions from participants. Yes. Yeah.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for throwing light because as a researcher, I was looking into understanding the rights-based approach from ancient medieval scriptures. So your lecture has given me an insight of how to go about it. Uh, Coming to the question, to what extent can we permit reformation so as to find a balance between our past and present? You were talking about how our laws have been resilient and reformative in their very essence. How do we find a balance then? That's the first part of the question, sir. And the second part is, then can we consider Constitution of India as a culmination of this process?
Second part is, I try to answer that. But the first part, I mean, you can go to any extent. Whenever a kind of reform is required and it is strongly felt by people, and I will be talking about these kinds of things tomorrow. I mean, there are very, very revolutionary changes introduced in Dharma Shastra. They may not have survived. See, life, society, history, everything is determined by a lot of factors. So many of the changes which were introduced in Dharma Shastra, we lost them. इसीलिए हम कहते हैं we have a cyclical concept of life. अच्छा है अभी सतयुग आया फिर कलयुग आ जाएगा फिर सतयुग आएगा. So this process of the society going up and down is constantly taking place. So we have already lost a lot of things, lost many very, very revolutionary changes which our ancestors introduced in the system. But the good thing is we know that they struggled, we know how they struggled, and it's for us to continue that struggle. So I will say there is no end to the kind of change that you want to introduce. And Dharmashastra, again, I think I missed it. Acha hua jo pooch liya, is a very wide thing. It does not include, it should not remain confined to Manusmriti, Yajnavalkya, Narasmriti, even to the digest. There are many alternative views of life in Dharma, in India. So while Dharma may be a little conservative about certain things, but there are alternative views available. Dharma Shastra, for example, if I talk of same sex marriage, Dharma Shastra has not criminalized it in the first place. It has not even approved it, but Kama Shastra speaks very eloquently in favor. If two people can live with great love and affection, aapko kya takleef hai? So even that view is available, and Kama Shastra is not 21st century. So we have these alternative views. Dharma Shastra is the more prevalent kind of a view which has survived all these years. But by making this statement, Kama Shastra is challenging that view. So there is a lot of challenge. मेरे टॉक से सिर्फ एक ही सेंटेंस समझना है, धर्मशास्त्र इज नॉट स्टैटिक, और जो परिवर्तन आपको अच्छा लग रहा है आप लाओ. Whatever change you think is good, you think is good. Otherwise, why will Manu be rejected by Yagnavak after a few hundred years? Very interesting. I may have the time to say. Manu says after the death of a person, all his property will go to his eldest son, or the eldest son will get some special share. Yagnavak says nothing doing. All sons will get an equal share. And जब याज्ञवल्क्य के टीकाकार विदाक्षरा बोलता है, this is my favorite topic. He says, Devan Bhatta also says, there were good times when the elder brothers were very good to their younger brothers, and they took good care of their younger brothers. And there were good times when younger brothers were so obedient, like Lakshman. अब ऐसा नहीं होता. So now going for equal distribution. So immediately within 300 years or 200 years, Manusmriti को पलट गया या केवल नहीं आता. So you can make all sorts of changes, and I will be talking of many more very significant changes in my presentation tomorrow. So कोई limit नहीं. It can be anything. This is my understanding of Dharmashastra.
Yes, Arvind.
Sir, you mentioned that there's a difference between Vyavhar and Adarsh. So does the concept of Adarsh remain same throughout these 3,000 years?
How can it remain? How can it remain? I think even core values will change.
Because of
Respect, family is a core value. Family relationships is a core value. But then the moment Vijnaneshwar says, but partition to hota hai na. So family unity rahe, so partition is a bad idea. Ved कहता है, brothers should not don't have a partition. अथर्ववेद में सूक्त है फैमिली की यूनिटी पे, बड़ा सुंदर सूक्त है, कभी सुना होगा. तो उसमें एक लाइन आई है, डोंट हैव एनी पार्टीशन. तो अगर आप वेद पे चले तो वेद में तो बड़ा क्लियर, देयर इज अ वेरी क्लियर रूल अबाउट अगेंस्ट पार्टीशन. बट पार्टीशन हैज बीन सच अ ट्रूथ ऑफ लाइफ. मनुस्मृति में से पार्टीशन हो रहा है, उससे पहले से पार्टीशन, जब से टेक्स्ट मिल रहा है. हिस्टोरिकली आई कांट प्लेस इट, बट जब से टेक्स्ट मिल रहा है तब से पार्टीशन हो रहा है. तो आदर्श क्या करेगा? तो आदर्श भी बदल जाते हैं. अब आदर्श क्यों कहे? नो, एवरीबॉडी शुड बी इंडिपेंडेंट, नोबडी शुड बी लेफ्ट एट द मर्सी ऑफ एनीवन. अब आदर्श बदल गया. पहले आदर्श के सब एक दूसरे के साथ प्यार से रहे, दैट्स द आइडियल. बट देख लिया भाई व्यवहार में ऐसा नहीं हो रहा. सो देयरफॉर ऑल द अर्लियर segments of the society or members of the family who were denied a share in the partition are subsequently given that share.
So sir, we can say that sometimes the Vyavhar can overlap the Adarsh also.
Yes. Why not? जब व्यवहार बदलेगा तो वो नया आदर्श बन जाएगा. You will create new ideal. You will create new values. Core values भी बदल जाएगी.
Any other question?
For a wonderful lecture, must say. Question is that do you think that by codification of law we have ruined the essence or values that were there prevalent in our?
No, I won't say that. Because all that I've said in my talk today is there is a constant attempt to codify. आज ही थोड़ी codify कर रहे हैं. Every time a smriti is being written, every time a digest is being written, every time a commentary is being written, there is an attempt to codify. और वो codify क्यों करता है? So that उसको लगता है कि this is a good model that we should now adopt. And वो सोचता है कि this should become firm. At least the codification for him becomes necessary so that when there is a state, when there are so many courts right from the village to, you have to have codification.
For example, so you referred to Mitaksha. If you look at Mitaksha, it was that was doing well. Women interests were taken care of because certain women were entitled to share. Father had the right to give certain part of property. There was a proportionality though applied that according to property, a small portion of it can be given to daughter. Provision of a maintenance, it was referred as Sridhan also. So then we see the codification of law and shift from recognizing the right of daughter in the share in the property of the father, then changing it to saying that she'll have an equal share even as a co-partner. So don't you think that it has kind of disrupted what Mitakshara had put across a balanced defined system, because judiciary is still plagued with thousands of cases on division of property pertaining post 2005 amendments.
So my response will still remain the same. You see, Mitakshara codified the law in a certain way. But again, just as Manu wasn't followed, Mitakshara was also not followed. हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि from 12th century onwards, consistently Mitakshara has been followed. It has not been followed. It has been followed in some places, mostly not followed. So therefore, जो अब codification हुआ, they had a certain model before them. But as somebody said, that comes to a second question. This is a continuous process. You may not be writing in Sanskrit anymore, but you're still trying to define core values. You're still trying to create that structures, social institutional structures to maintain some kind of stability, bring about peace, etc., etc. Whatever the purposes of law should be, we are still trying to do it. अब भाषा बदल गई, वो अलग बात है. But that process will go on. It will not end. You will never come with the बेस्ट एवर मॉडल जो न भूतो न भविष्यति, कभी ऐसा दूसरा बनेगा नहीं, बिकॉज लाइफ विल फिर चेंज हो जाएगी. Every time life change होगी, you will need to readjust your laws. So what I believe is that this is what Dharma Shastra tells me, that law and dharma has to constantly keep pace with the changes happening in the society.
Good morning, sir. Sir, I want to ask the question that nowadays there is we can see that there is the government, or you can say the authority, want to change to bring a change in the history. जो हमारा rich culture रहा है, जो हमारी एक history रही है कि we were invaded so many times by Muslims or by the Britishers. So and we have this knowledge about our history. So it is it proper to change the course of our history, or because we are now in a dilemma situation ki the thing which is presented today is that was our history, or the thing which we have read in our schools, that was our history.
Well, I can easily get away by not answering this question because this pertains to rewriting of history and not of the ये क्वेश्चन फर्क नेचर का है. दिस इज मोर अ क्वेश्चन on pertaining to politics of writing history than to the Dharma Shastra. I don't know the comment.
Somebody rightly said history is not found, it is created. So in that sense, somebody created history, nobody was there to live. And it must be based upon evidence and proper testimony, proper interpretation. That is all.
उसमें भी आएगा ना कि हिस्ट्री राइटिंग के क्या प्रिंसिपल्स हैं. It might be, I mean, I don't know if this discussion is at all relevant, but if history writing leads to further disharmony, then I'll say, भाई मत लिखो, रहने दो, let sleeping dogs lie. That is what we tried in the early phase of partition. In itna violence, itni मारकाट मची. So we thought, yeah, don't raise controversial issues. We know what has happened in history, but don't talk about it. Well, that was a deliberate decision, and that was not a bad decision at that time. अगर हम वो सारी बातों उखाड़ते रहते उस वक्त तो हम कहीं होते ही नहीं आज की तारीख में. We were focusing more on how to rebuild the country. We were focusing on economic rebuilding the economy. हम concentrate कर रहे थे बड़े-बड़े dams बनाने में, बड़े-बड़े steel plants लगाने में, बड़े-बड़े technology को IITs बना रहे थे, IIMs बना रहे थे. That was the focus at that point in time. And I think this whole this Nehruvian style of history writing was deliberate. बहुत सोच समझ के उन्होंने ये सोचा था कि let us forget, just एक slate को clean कर दो. 47 15 अगस्त 1947, let us be reborn. जो कुछ हो गया हिस्ट्री में छोड़ दो उसको. You can't go and kind of change what has happened in the past. क्या करोगे? इसमें कोई शक है? उत्तर भारत में एक भी बड़ा मंदिर नहीं है, कोई शक है? तोड़े गए, इसमें कोई शक है? अब मैं क्या करूं? मैं किससे बदला लूं? औरंगजेब को पकड़ के लाऊं? चलो सब चलते, औरंगजेब की कमर खोद देते, उससे क्या होगा? वो तो हमारे पास ही है. How is it going to help? So that was deliberately done. सोच समझ के वो फैसला लिया गया था. अब कुछ लोगों को नहीं अच्छा लगा, बहुत लोगों को नहीं अच्छा लगा कि ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. The history should be written as it happened. That is not wrong. But उससे फायदा क्या होगा? How is it going to help us?
There is a lot of emphasis on political history. Now we're looking at more of administrative history, cultural history. Probably that's another lens to look at it.
So certain issues were deliberately dusted under the carpet. इसमें कोई शक नहीं. वो एक अच्छी इंटेंशन से किया गया था और मैं तो उस इंटेंशन के फेवर में आज भी. There's no point in raking up issues जिसका कोई समाधान नहीं, सिवाय लड़ाई झगड़े की.
When the Dalit was persecuted,
See, certain issues have been raised. ऐसा नहीं हमने सारे issues को दबाया. हमने communal issues को दबाया. हमने caste issues को नहीं दबाया.
when they talk about Rwanda, and Hutu, two tribes, one of the tribes is minority. So if we are going to bury all these facts,
Don't let us not talk in a vacuum. Theoretically तो सारे issues बड़े relevant होते हैं, तो आप जो बोल रहे हो that is not less relevant, it's very relevant. But in a particular society, in a particular country, कौन सा issue है जिसको उठाना चाहिए और किसको नहीं उठाना चाहिए, वो सोसाइटी में सोचा जाना चाहिए. उसको उठाने से हमें अभी फायदा है नहीं है, देश का क्या किस दिशा में जाएगा, there's no harm in thinking about these things.
बुद्धिज्म में कहा जाता है कि कोई भी दुनिया का कोई भी बुरा से बुरा समय वो भी चला जाएगा, अच्छा से अच्छा समय चला जाएगा. So sometimes better to ignore something.
The fact is, Madam's question has relevance in the sense like, our sir stood here. Most of us had not referred or approached the text in the manner the sir has put in front of us. So we could have it as part of curriculum in the school to understand that this text existed, then this could have been part of our curriculum, but because of this disconnect, I was a student of history. I've done my schooling and my teachers from Delhi itself. So my teachers had this ancient period would stop at somewhere and they describe all different kingdoms, and then the Advent would go to, they would describe Muslim period coming of Muslim. Suddenly we jump to the modern India, talking about how what Britishers did, and everything good aspect of it. So critical thinking is very, very integral to development, very important. So I think Madam's question, I can, if she agrees to me, is kind of disconnect. We should have a teacher like you teaching. I'm not trying to demote you, a university teacher, but a teacher like you telling students that yes, this has been there, this was your past, and you can study it like this. This should be your approach.
So, I have not said that no issue should be raised.
Right.
Because in response to it, every society has to think कि हम कौन से issues को raise करें और कौन से को ना करें. Indiscriminately पुराने issues को raise करके लड़ाई झगड़ा बढ़ाना है तब तो problem है. But जो आप कह रही हैं, I think it is very important as a student of Sanskrit, again I would say it is very important for India to rediscover its knowledge systems and kind of make them a part of the learning curriculum. If not at the school level, then at least at the university and research level, certainly, no doubt about it.
सर एक क्वेश्चन था मेरा, जैसे आप बोल रहे थे कि जो धर्म है, धर्म में अस्थिरता और फिर स्थिर और अस्थिर में चल रहा है, तो एक तरफ ऐसा ही लग रहा है कि जो हमारा वर्ल्ड है वो वैश्वीकरण हो रहा है, ग्लोबलाइजेशन हो रही है, तो उस तरफ और जो हमारी ग्रोथ है वर्ल्ड की वो किस तरह से हो सकती है? तो
वैश्वीकरण भी एक फिनोमेना ही तो है. तो आप
नहीं,
कैसे अपने देश में
वैश्वीकरण में जैसे अभी कोई कंट्रियां हैं पावरफुल में आ रही हैं, अपने आप को
अगर वैश्वीकरण
कंपटीशन में चल रही है, अपना वर्चस्व स्थापित करने में लगी हुई है, तो कहाँ हम अपने एक पीसफुल मतलब एक शांति स्थिर कर सकते हैं?
I think
ये तो बहुत आप मुझसे अंतरराष्ट्रीय राजनीति के सवाल से पूछ लेंगे.
Mr. Hemraj is our technical staff here. He is not from the field of law, and was so engrossed in your lecture. This is what I was trying to share, that it's so important to understand. So from that perspective,
नहीं.
a person from non-law background is asking.
सारे में विश्व में सारे देश अपने कुछ 2-4 देश हैं जो अपने चलराहट बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. ये राजनीति का सवाल है. वो देश के जो भी देश के राजनेता हैं, they will have to, और जो राजनीति के विशेषज्ञ हैं, they will have to think के उसको कैसे हैंडल किया जाए, और उसको जिस भी तरह से साम दान दंड भेद जो भी नीति है उसको करके आप you will have to defend the country and the economy and the society, वो तो करना ही पड़ेगा. बट ये क्वेश्चन ऐसा है जो मेरा डायरेक्टली मेरे विषय का है.
Thank you, sir. Sir, is it a correct approach to write for a law student to write paper on Dharmshastra without having knowledge of Sanskrit and relying upon the commentaries, English commentaries?
मुझे नहीं लगता सिर्फ जो ट्रांसलेशन हैं, इंग्लिश ट्रांसलेशन अवेलेबल हैं, चाहे वो पहले की गए हैं या अब की जा रही हैं, तो बाय एंड लार्ज रीजनेबली गुड. अगर आपको संस्कृत पे एक्सेस नहीं है, देयर इज नो नीड टू बी स्केर्ड ऑफ नॉट लुकिंग एट इट. इफ यू वांट टू लर्न संस्कृत, आई एम विलिंग.
That was the same criticism that Romula Thapar and the likes of the historians had to face.
They don't
उन्होंने
know.
कभी पढ़ा ही नहीं, manuscripts और वो history लिखते हैं.
So,
Much-
that is
much
one
is-
of the arguments to, yeah, I know, I understand. Romila Thapar के बारे में हमारे ये बहुत कहा जाता था, बट आप कौन से सोर्सेस देख रहे हैं, फिर किसके ट्रांसलेशन देख रहे हैं? अगर आप कुछ ऐसे ही टेक्स्ट पर रिलाय करने लगे जो डेलिबरेट डिस्टॉर्शंस थे और उसको प्रमाण मान लिया, तब तो मुश्किल है. बट हमारे केस में, धर्मशास्त्र केस में ऐसा नहीं है. बाय एंड लार्ज, चाहे वो जॉली के किए हुए ट्रांसलेशन हो या पैट्रिक ऑलिवेल आप कर रहे हैं, दे सीम टू बी रीजनेबली गुड.
Yes.
लेकिन हाँ, ये कि धर्मशास्त्र का बहुत सारा साहित्य ऑलरेडी इंग्लिश ट्रांसलेशन में, बिकॉज अंग्रेजों के जमाने में दैट वाज एक्चुअली बीइंग employed in various courts in the country. So there is a lot of available literature. और अगर कहीं पर लगता हो कि ये ठीक नहीं है, then we can have a dialogue. There can be a dialogue between lawyers and Sanskritists. उसी के ये correction है.
वही मैं बात कर रहा था, बिकॉज एडवर्ड साइड ने भी ओरिएंटलिज्म में यही कहा था कि बिकॉज व्हेन वी ट्रांसलेट समथिंग वी मे हैव अ वेरी पेजोरेटिव माइंडसेट व्हाइल ट्रांसलेटिंग दैट ओरिजिनल. बिकॉज अलादीन जैसे सीरियल में भी शुरुआत ये होती है कि I have come from a land which is which consists of beasts and which consists of people who are uneducated. This is what that opening theme of the Aladdin serial says, and this level of superiority complex may defeat the very purpose of the translation itself. That's what.
That's what I'm saying. Therefore, you have to be very careful about each translation. Whether उसमें क्या गलतियां आ रही हैं. कुछ गलतियां, तो let us point out those. So that will be a very different kind of activity. I had one of my students to work on the Patrick Olivel's translations of the Smritis. वो पूरा नहीं हुआ काम, बट मैंने भी जब देखा तो बाय एंड लार्ज ठीक है, कहीं कहीं कुछ गलतियां हो सकती है. मैं पैट्रिक ऑलिवेल ने जो विष्णु स्मृति का अपना टेक्स्ट निकाला था, उस पर मैंने उसके लॉन्च के टाइम पे मैं वाज वन ऑफ द कमेंटेटर्स. तो मैं अभी भी देख रहा हूँ, बाय एंड लार्ज ठीक है. तो संसद वाला लिख रहा, तो वो ये गारंटी क्या है कि वो ठीक कर लेगा? मैं किसी शब्द को गलत समझ जाऊं. हाँ, इंटेंशन ठीक होनी चाहिए, इंटेंशन अच्छी होनी. अगर किसी को इविल इंटेंशन, जैसे कुछ कई ऐसे अंग्रेज जिन्होंने वेद के बारे में लिखा. अब हमें, जब हम कॉलेज में गए 1975 में, तो एक किताब बताइए, थर्ड वेद की हिस्ट्री पढ़नी है, फादर ग्रिस्वोल्ड की पढ़ लो, रिलीजन ऑफ द वेद. बहुत अच्छी किताब है, गलत नहीं है, क्योंकि वो साइंस की व्याख्या के आधार पर सब कुछ. हमारी भी तो गलतियां देखो, हमारे अपने देश में कितनी अपने आप को हमने कितना मिसअंडरस्टैंड और कितना मिसइंटरप्रेट किया है. अगर साइंस के इंटरप्रिटेशन के आधार पर कोई वेद को पढ़ेगा तो वो ही लिखेगा. तो फादर ग्रिस्वोल्ड अपने लास्ट में लिखता है, क्रिश्चियन पादरी है, मैंने ये किताब इसलिए लिखी ताकि हिंदुओं को समझ में आ जाए कि उनका वेद कितना घटिया है. बट वो सारे वेद को घटिया उसने तो साइंस के बेसिस पर सिद्ध किया है. तो मैं फादर ग्रिस्वोल्ड से लड़ूं कि पहले साइंस से लड़ूं? इसीलिए साइंस से इतना लड़े स्वामी दयानंद सरस्वती, लड़े साइंस से इतना लड़े महर्षि अरविंद लड़े, कि तुमने तो बिल्कुल ही ऐसी इंटरप्रिटेशन वेद की कर दी कि अंग्रेजों को वो मसाला मिल गया हिंदुस्तान की छिछालेदार करने का. तो वो हमारे सिस्टम में प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, हमारी हिस्ट्री में भी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं. बट ट्रांसलेशन से मत डरो, संस्कृत पढ़नी जरूर पढ़ो, यू आर मोस्ट वेलकम.
Sir, I have a question. I was reading Thomas McViley, The Shape of Ancient Thought, and in that book, in the introduction of that book, it was suggested that Oriental wisdom is irrational in nature, and Greco-Roman thought is rational in nature, and that's why it was suggested that Plato was somehow friendly in terms of Oriental wisdom, because he thought he was irrational in that sense, and Aristotle was rational because he was very much engrossed in rationalizing things, and that is how this categorization started with those scholarship. Then we have another kind of scholarship in William Jones, etc., who tried to glorify, or we may say that try to understand the context of relationship between Greco-Roman culture and Vedic culture, and try to understand the relationship of Sanskrit and Latin and their common sources. So this is another kind of a scholarship. In in colonial scholarship, we find some pejorative writings, at the same time some writings which either glorify or appreciative. So, do you agree with such kind of a scholarship, particularly in context of colonial scholarship, which has created problem for creating an image that whatever Indian literatures had over Dharmashastras, these were irrational in characters, and British gave to India proper legal system, proper law, and proper understanding of justice.
See, I have done very little reading on this, but मेरी उसमें understanding है कि initially when they started their legal system here, they started setting up courts in Calcutta, etc. They were baffled by this variation, so many variety of dharmashastras produced before them. और उनके लिए बड़ा मुश्किल हो रहा था कि हम क्या. So therefore there was at least Warren Hastings and at least Sir William Jones, I think, made a very sincere attempt to cut all kind of flab and get a nice digest made. And but then a problem ये भी हुई कि by the time the अंग्रेज came to India, टेक्नोलॉजी इतनी बदल चुकी थी, इकोनॉमी इतनी बदल चुकी थी all over the world कि हम पुराने मेजर से उसको नहीं कर सकते. अगर आज आप बोलो सर ट्रेड लॉ क्या है इंडिया में, तो हमारे मैंने बताया छोटी मोटी मार्केट की आप बात कर रहे हैं. जिस तरह के आज ट्रेड रिलेटेड क्राइम हो रहा है, वो आपको कभी सोचने पे भी नहीं मिलेगा उसमें. So times have changed. So part of it you may just read as part of history. Some of the ideas are good, but the basic idea that is good and which I like and which I promote and propagate is that we have not remained static. We have tried to evolve ourselves, and therefore further evolution is the only way.
And is there any role of Mimamsa?
मीमांसा का रोल है. कल मैं थोड़ा सा बोलूंगा. मीमांसा का रोल है इंटरप्रिटेशन का, जो मैंने लास्ट में किया. इट इज अबाउट इंटरप्रेटिंग अ टेक्स्ट. इट्स लाइक योर इंटरप्रिटेशन ऑफ स्टैट्यूट्स. अब टेक्स्ट है मेरे सामने, बट आई थिंक इफ आई टेक अ वेरी लिमिटेड apparent meaning, then I can't do justice, so I have to expand it, give it a different meaning, and apply the same law to many different situations which the lawmakers might not even have thought of. तो वही सारी चीजें, एंड देन वर्ड्स की कैसे हार्मोनियस कंस्ट्रक्शन और ऑल दीस प्रिंसिपल्स, तो सब हमारे यहाँ खूब अच्छी तरह से लिखे. बट मोर देन दैट, लॉजिक इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. लॉ एंड धर्म बोथ आर बेस्ड ऑन लॉजिक. Faith is important, but faith in our country has always been tested on logic. आंख बंद करके हमने किसी चीज को नहीं एक्सेप्ट किया. मैं कल एक लाइन बोलूंगा, वो रेवोल्यूशनरी लाइन है. पूरी दुनिया में कोई कल्चर नहीं बोलेगी. हमने बोला है कि अगर कोई चीज शास्त्र में लिखी है लेकिन लोग उससे विद्वेष करते हैं तो उसका पालन नहीं होना चाहिए. दिस इज याज्ञवल्क्य श्रुति. दिस इज मनुस्मृति, जिसको सब इतनी गाली देते हैं. धर्म्यम अस्वर्ग्यम लोक वितुष्टम धर्म्यम में प्राचरेत न तू. धर्म है, धर्म में लिखा, तब भी उसका आचरण न करे यदि वो लोक विद्विष्ट हो. समथिंग व्हिच इज सो डिस्पाइज्ड बाय पीपल, दैट मींस समथिंग रिटन इन द टेक्स्ट ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम कैन बिकम सो डिटेस्टेबल. कोई नहीं बोलेगा पूरी दुनिया में ये हमने बोला है सिर्फ. मैं तो उस परंपरा को मानता हूँ. आंख बंद करके मेरा धर्म है इसको पालन करूंगा, नहीं मानता. बिकॉज दैट इज नॉट व्हाट धर्मशास्त्र इज.
Thank you so much, sir. We are looking forward to another lecture tomorrow. Thank you so much.